Well, Dr. Andrea Christian Parks, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with me yet again. You have been a guest a few times on my show, well, the former show, the Working Woman Radio Show, and now on the Elevate Talk Show. I always look forward to talking to you out because I know what you're going to say is not just going to be inspiring to me, but to my guests. And today we're going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart: menopause, perimenopause. Millions of women deal with it every year, not just in America, but around the world. And I've had, matter of fact, one of the ways we met was several years ago. You were one of the panelists on at a forum that I hosted. That was a while back. And so here we are again talking about the same thing. So let's get straight into it because there's a lot that I want to pick your brain about. First, can you explain to my audience what menopause is and how it differs from perimenopause? And I say that because I think we need to not assume that everybody knows what it is, because I personally didn't know what was happening to me 10, 15 years ago when I started the process. It took me a while to figure it out. I thought I was dying. So I think it's really important that we just explain that. What is menopause and how does it differ from perimenopause?
Perfect. Great start. So menopause is a point in time where after everything else, that's the menopause time for women. Usually that's around 51. That's the average age of menopause. But what that means is that's the time when a woman has not had a menstrual cycle for 12 full months. And at that point, the diagnosis of menopause is made in retrospect. We look back and say, oh, it's been 12 months.
Right.
It's a woman of menopausal age. So we use over 40. And at that point, that is the menopause. So menopause is everything after that point, 12 months with no period.
Gotcha.
Perimenopause, on the other hand, is the time surrounding getting to menopause.
Right.
So for women, that can be 4 or 5 years in advance of the actual menopause. And for many women, the changes that lead into that start even earlier.
Yep.
So I start to hear from most of my patients somewhere in the late 30s, early 40s. They're starting to notice changes in their cycles, changes in their PMS, changes all around their cycles, and throughout the monthly changes that lead well into long years before you actually get to menopause. And that's perimenopause.
That's right. Yeah. And I, again, when for me personally, that started around 42, 43. I am now 56 and I haven't had a period in 4 years. So I'm definitely in menopause. But that time before that was several years leading up to that point. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on. Like I said, I had all these changes and bells and whistles going off. I thought something really, really bad was happening to me. Went to the doctor, but started talking to some of the older women in my church. And that's when I realized they clued me in and said, girl, you're going through, well, they said menopause, but it was actually, technically, it was really perimenopause.
Perimenopause, right.
So good explanation. So now, and you sort of answered that just a minute ago. My question is, when can a woman expect to start going through perimenopause? And does that vary from woman to woman, and can external things affect that?
Absolutely. It does vary woman to woman. It's interesting. One question I ask women often, because they're saying, well, am I menopausal, or am I close, or how do I know when I'm going to go through menopause? And one of the things I ask them, and this is a hard question to answer, is, do you know when your mom went through menopause? And the problem is, for the generation ahead of us, almost all of them had hysterectomies. So they don't know when they went through menopause.
That's just like my mom. She had one. She's 85 now, but I remember when I was starting this process, I asked her, she's like, I don't know, baby. Because basically, I guess it was surgical menopause at that point. Because she had all of her ovaries. She had everything removed. So, yep.
So her menopause happened when her hysterectomy happened. When would it have happened naturally? We'll never know.
Wow.
So if you can answer that question, if your mom says, oh, I went through menopause at 48.
Right.
Well, it's a decent indicator of when you might go through menopause, somewhere around when your mom did. If you have
Wow.
sisters and they all, so you'll
Yeah.
notice that people kind of cluster around a certain time period, but
That's
not
good.
everybody. So
Yes.
that's why I say the average age is 51. It can be
Yes.
years before, it can be some
Right.
years after.
Mhm.
I do find that we do know smokers
Yes.
go through menopause a little earlier,
Yes. Yes.
often.
Yes.
How early? Depends. What would
Right.
your natural menopause have been? That's part of
Right.
the question.
That's right. That's
I
exactly
do
right.
notice that some, and not all by
Yeah.
any means, but I do notice that African American women seem to go through a little bit later.
Okay.
Sometimes it's past 51. I've had a few women over the years who
Yes.
are 55,
Yes.
56, and they shouldn't I be done by now?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Not for you.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
individual. It is
Wow.
individual. But there are
Yeah.
some women who are 55, they stop
Yeah.
having their period. So, and
Wow,
that's
wow,
normal.
yes. So it varies. You mentioned about smokers. I had a good friend, neighbor friend, she's since passed on, who was a chain smoker. And I remember us talking about this some years ago. And
Mhm.
she went through menopause. I mean, full, I mean, she ceased having periods like at 39. But part of that was she was, like I said, a
Mhm.
heavy smoker, but also she
Mhm.
had a very traumatic event happen to her. And so I don't know
Mhm.
what, whether the two things together had, played into her, but she said that was it for me. I never had another period. And it was like 39, 40 years
Mhm.
old. So that sort of
Right.
just confirms what you were saying. So now, as a gynecologist, let's talk about this a little bit, so we can flesh this out a little bit. But what are some of the most common symptoms that come with perimenopause / menopause? What can women expect to see, feel, and have?
Well, the most common symptoms, the things that people really complain about
Yeah,
are hot flashes,
yeah,
night sweats,
yeah.
irregular periods.
Mhm.
Those are the really big ones. So
Yeah.
it's very frustrating when your period comes, goes, and comes right back 2 weeks
Oh
later,
my God.
or
Yes.
you skip 3 months and then you think, okay, maybe I'm good, and you have this monster period,
Yes. Yes.
or
Yes.
you have these really intense hot flashes. You're trying to lead a meeting and you're just
Yes.
breaking out
Yes.
in a sweat,
Yes. Oh goodness.
or you're trying to sleep and 3 and 4 times a night you're
Yeah.
waking up and you feel like you got to change your clothes, and
Yeah.
so that kind of stuff bothers people
Wow.
the
Yeah.
most.
Wow.
But there's other things that
Mhm.
people notice that aren't necessarily for everybody, or
Right.
even, I mean, and to be fair,
Yeah.
some women,
Yeah.
I would not say most, but
Yes.
some women do not have much of anything. They just
Wow.
stop having their
Yeah.
period.
That's just
I'd
it.
say that's more rare,
Right.
but also people
Mhm.
just don't complain about when nothing
That's
happens.
what I
So I
think
don't
too.
hear as much of that.
Right.
The other things that people notice are more intense mood swings,
Yes.
more irritability.
Definitely.
And a lot of women are like, look, doc, you got to do something
Yeah.
because, I can't get along with my husband, my kids,
Yes.
like they want to
Yes.
put me
Yes.
out. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we gotta
Yes.
fix this. And
Yes.
so for a lot of people,
Mhm.
it relates to the lack of sleep. It
Yep.
relates to the, nothing works well when we don't
No.
get
No.
decent sleep, and
Nothing.
it's night after night after
Yeah.
night.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then there's also, there are hormonal mood shifts and things that are going on. And
Mhm.
it's going to sound
Mhm.
hard, and it
Mhm.
is, but
Mhm.
it is almost like
Mhm.
puberty in reverse. And if you
Right. I've
think
heard that.
about a teenager who's
Yes.
going through,
Yes. All
and
these changes.
all that
Yeah.
hormonal stuff going
Yeah.
on,
Right.
they're normal,
Right.
but it doesn't make it easy. And that's
No.
the main thing that's happening for
Yeah.
us.
That I like that. It's normal, but it doesn't make it easy. And I remember reading that in one of my books that I got during the height of everything, just because I was at a place where I just needed to know what was happening to me. And so I
Hmm.
began to really just eat up, well, not figuratively, just
Hmm.
take in all this information. And it helped me to realize that this was normal, but not that it made it easier, but it did help me know I'm not going crazy. So,
Exactly.
but yeah, so all of those things going on because of hormonal changes. And so, I was going to say something to that, maybe it'll come back to me, but, what a lot of doctors, I remember going in talking to my OBGYN, and she says, well, here's what you can do. First, one of the first things she said was, I think you're too young. When I first went in, I was 43, 44. I was like, she's like, but then I visit her again a year or two later. She says, sounds like you are going through perimenopause. Here, take some HRTs. And I just didn't want to do that. So my question is to you, there are a lot of doctors that do recommend that, but first of all, tell me more about tell our audience more about what HRTs are and the pros and cons of all of that.
Okay. Well, let me do the basic concept of HRT is hormone replacement therapy is designed to attempt to replenish the hormones that your ovaries were producing in higher amounts.
Right.
Primarily estrogen. Right. So as your menopause happens, menopause is failure of the ovaries to continue to produce. Right. Mostly estrogen. They produce other hormones too, but that's the primary, with a few types of estrogen. Right. So when they stop producing estrogen, the dominant estrogen pretty much altogether, that's menopause. Right. So what we're doing with hormone replacement therapy is giving that back. Now, there's two categories, women with a uterus and women without a uterus. Right. And women with a uterus can have estrogen plus progesterone. Right. They have to have the progesterone to protect the lining of the uterus from the estrogen causing overgrowth of those cells, which can cause uterine cancer. Sure. So you got to take two hormones if you have a uterus. If you don't have a uterus and you've had a hysterectomy, but you still have your ovaries, and then you start going through the changes towards menopause, you could just take estrogen. Okay. Now, it gets fancier than that, and people are doing all kinds of different testosterone supplements and things like that. But primarily, what people are lacking mostly is the estrogen, and that's the hormone replacement. Wow. And that's what the hormone replacement therapy gives them. Uh-huh. Okay, got you. So now, are there, having said all of that, when a woman comes in and you tell her about this and she says, okay, I want this, is there a downside to taking HRTs? What's the other part of it? Well, at the risk of upsetting people who love their HRT, yes, there's risks to everything that we do and prescribe, every procedure, every medication. Right. Having said that, when the studies first came out, the Women's Health Initiative study, oh gosh, probably 20 years ago now, maybe longer. The concern was that instead of, let me just say, the study was designed to figure out if we could reduce heart disease in women. Right. Because we know that before menopause, women have lower rates of heart disease, and after higher. It's more like the amount of heart disease that men have. Wow. So maybe if we give hormone replacement, then we'll keep women from having heart attacks and strokes. But we found out that's not the case. Wow. In a general sense. Yeah. But then over the years of looking at that study, the initial discussion was, oh no, it actually has a slightly increased risk of heart attack, stroke, blood clots, and breast cancer. Right. Tiny numbers, but the risk was there. Right. So everybody said, oh no, don't do hormone replacement therapy unless you have to. Right. And then only for a little bit amount of time, and only for symptoms. That's the only reason why we're doing it, and understand the risks. Right. But as time has gone on, we've looked at hormone replacement therapy more carefully with the people that were in the study, based on age, based on disease process, all this sort of thing. And there actually might be some protection for the heart in the few years around menopause. Yes. So, when you get about 5-6 years out from menopause, then those benefits start to go away, and then the risks start to climb again. I got it. Having said that, though, the other downside to hormone replacement therapy, once you start it, getting off of it isn't always that easy. Oh, wow. There are a few people over the years who've said, oh, I just stopped my HRT, it was fine. Yeah. And that's okay. Yes. But a lot of women really have to taper very slowly, or their menopausal symptoms come back. Oh, wow. They're starting over that whole process of transitioning into menopause. And so some people I don't want to do all that, and that's fine. And then we need to think of something else. But if hormone replacement therapy is started, for a lot of people, it's a process to come off. Wow. And we don't recommend that people stay on it indefinitely. Like my grandmother was on HRT probably into her 70s. Yes. And we don't recommend that because we do
No.
know about the risks of heart attack and stroke and breast cancer and blood clots.
Wow, wow. Before I go on to my next question, I just had another question that actually isn't in the list that I gave you. You talked about HRTs replacing estrogen because a woman's estrogen, I guess, drops during that whole period. But what about estrogen dominance? It seems like if there's an issue with estrogen dominance, then giving a woman more estrogen would create more estrogen dominance. Can you explain that to me?
Well, the estrogen dominance isn't coming from the ovaries.
Oh,
primarily.
okay.
So what's happening in menopause is that the ovaries are producing less and less and less estrogen
Yes.
themselves.
Yes.
What's happening, and this is not for everyone, there's
Right.
people who are not in this category who still have estrogen dominance,
Yes.
but a lot of estrogen dominance can be from the weight that we're actually carrying. So we store extra estrogen in our
Yes.
fat.
Yes.
And so when we carry extra weight, we
Yeah.
actually carry extra estrogen. It doesn't show up in blood tests. That's not how you find it. But
Okay.
it creates an estrogen dominant kind of environment. And so you end
Wow.
up with extra estrogen, and then you can balance it with
Yes.
some progesterone.
Yes.
Some
Yes.
people with heavy periods and that sort of thing
Yes.
that estrogen dominance can produce,
Yes.
but it's not all
Yeah.
ovaries. And the amount of hormone replacement you're doing is
Yes.
small doses,
Really.
but it doesn't, it helps you feel better,
Yeah.
but it doesn't address the environment going on in the rest of the body
Ah.
if you're in
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
estrogen
Yeah.
dominant state.
Wow. That's big. So okay. So let's do the flip. Let's flip the coin. We talked about HRTs. What are some alternatives to the HRTs? What are some natural alternatives for women who may want to go that route?
Now, this is where I usually start the conversation. So
Yes.
when my patients come in, and because a lot of people have heard about risks of HRT and they don't want to start there, we
Right.
usually start with what else can we do? We start
Right.
that we can end up at HRT if
Right.
necessary.
Right. Right.
So the first thing I start doing is talking about lifestyle stuff.
Yes.
So there's, and I'll just go through real
Yes.
briefly because this is an extensive conversation I have
Right.
with my
It
patients.
is.
But basics right
Mm,
now, there's so
mm.
many products on the market.
Yes.
So first big issue people are having is sleep. So
Right.
how do we address that? How do we get people to sleep better?
Hmm.
So things like cooling mats
Yeah.
that you can get, real simple ones that are the gel underneath the
Yes.
sheets, or you can get the fancy ones that circulate cold water underneath
Yes.
you while you
Yes.
sleep,
Yes.
putting
Yes.
the fan,
Yes.
wearing menopause pajamas. So
Wow.
there are like fabrics made out of viscose or bamboo that are moisture
Wow.
wicking, like exercise clothes that
I
you can
love it.
sleep in. Much easier, much cooler to the skin. A lot of people
Definitely.
like that.
Yes.
Changing the temperature in your room, changing your
Definitely.
bedding. They have
Yes.
different kinds of sheets, things like that.
Yes.
The other thing is sometimes there's certain triggers for
Yes.
hot flashes. Certainly, stress will do it.
Yes.
Alcohol,
Yep.
spicy foods,
Wow.
sometimes sugar.
Right.
All the stuff
Definitely
we
sugar.
like, all the stuff
Yep.
that we use to help ourselves feel better,
Yep.
also can make our hot flashes
Yes, it
worse.
can. Hmm.
Yeah. So those are some things. There's like environmental things that people can
Yes.
do.
Sure.
And then there's the supplements, and there's the simple stuff that you can grab at,
Yeah.
Walmart or
Sure.
any
Sure.
pharmacy,
Mhm.
like Estrogen. And
Right.
estrogen is a plant like estrogen-like compound. And
Yes.
for a lot of people, that's helpful.
Yes.
There's another product called Black Cohosh. That's
I've
another
heard.
herb, and a lot of people find that useful. I tell
Mhm.
people though, they're not like medications. You need
Right.
to give them some time, at least a month
Yes.
or two,
Yes. Yes.
to really work.
Mhm.
Then there's another one that I mentioned to people called
Mm.
Estrovera, and
Yeah.
Estrovera is not easier to find. You do have to get that one online, and it
Okay.
is a lot more expensive,
Okay.
but it works for some people.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
that's a next step up. If they've already
Yes.
tried over the
Yes.
counter easy stuff to
Yes.
find, then
Yes.
I recommend Estrovera.
Yeah, now I've
And
heard of and I've actually purchased this and used it a while back, and I'm thinking about getting some more. The progestogen creams,
Mhm.
made from like
Wild
yam,
yam
yeah,
and things
that kind
like
of
that.
thing.
Mhm.
And again, that goes back to you said women who have I guess, uteruses, they can use, and so they can use that in combination, I guess, with estrogen, to bring some balance, I guess, to, and which, and I guess it's the imbalance that's causing all these crazy symptoms.
Well, it's the way the ovaries are
Mm.
producing and then not producing estrogen. So what your
Oh,
body is noticing is these abrupt drops. You're used
okay.
to kind of a, a level of estrogen, but as you get closer to menopause, what you find is the estrogen goes down
Ah, yes,
over time,
yes,
but it's up and down and up and down. It's that
yes, yes,
the
yes,
roller coaster.
yes.
That's
Oh
what you're
my God,
feeling.
yes,
So when
yes,
it's down, you have the hot flashes and then you
yes,
don't have periods. And then when it's up, you have,
yes.
you have less hot
Yeah.
flashes and you might
Right.
have heavy bleeding. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
whole,
it's a whole thing. It's a,
yeah.
and I think the word roller coaster is very appropriate. So, now, how you mentioned briefly this a few moments ago, but how, let's get into how diet and exercise affects this whole menopause, perimenopausal time. How does that factor into things?
Well, a lot of women will find if they exercise
Mhm.
regularly that
Yeah.
decreases the frequency of their hot flashes.
Yes,
So there's a motivator right there.
definitely.
Um, and it makes them feel better
Yeah,
and
it
helps
did. Yeah.
sleep. And you mentioned the progesterone cream. I
Mhm.
wouldn't use that as a hormone replacement with estrogen.
Okay.
I'm not sure that you can get enough to protect
Okay.
against the estrogen of the hormone
Okay.
pill.
Right.
But a lot of women will use estrogen creams to
Yeah.
help with sleep,
Yes.
and sometimes they'll find it helps with mood. A lot of
Right.
the progesterone can help with relaxation and rest.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So I
Yeah. Go
totally fine.
for it.
Grab that
Yeah.
wild yam, progesterone, see how you feel.
Yeah,
No problem.
exactly. I try it. Okay.
So
Yeah, but the diet and exercise definitely, like you said, does. But I know personally, I
mhm,
was driving my family crazy a few years ago, but I just said, you know what? The irony was, although I was fatigued and didn't feel like exercising, once I started to do it, I
mhm.
began to feel better and I just kept going. I just started walking one day and I just kept going. And my husband is like, continue to do what you're doing because it's working for
Yes,
all of us.
exactly. Exactly. Yes. And I do think diet helps.
Yes,
Um, and I'm not a fan of extreme or crazy
I know
diet.
you're
I
not.
think
Mm-mm.
you do what works for you. But the
Right.
cleaner you can eat, the less
Yes,
processed food,
yes,
the less flour and sugar, things that
yes,
cause a lot of bloating, and that causes a
yes,
lot of discomfort for
yes,
women. We just don't
yeah.
metabolize that stuff as well when we get closer to menopause.
Yes,
Um, but getting away from that kind of food and
yeah.
eating more whole foods
Mhm.
actually can help women feel, especially with all of the
Yes.
bloat that we
Yes, yes,
experience,
yes,
that
yes.
you can
Yeah,
feel better with.
I can attest to that. I've, you know, for since, well, let's see, I started November 16th of last year and went and did well. And I did a keto thing, and it just was one of those things where I just was feeling so bad, Dr. Andrea, that I just one day I just said, I'm going to eliminate the sugars, I'm going to eliminate all of the breads. And I did it for about 4 months. I lost 30 pounds.
Mm,
So I went from November into about March, so 4 to 5 months. Now, I will admit that I did fall off the wagon some. I've not gone back to eating the pastas or the rices or much of the breads. I do eat some starchy foods now, but I will, what the reason I mention it is because it did help me so much with the bloating. And
mhm.
so and I'm looking to start it again, now. So I personally do recommend that. It does help.
Yeah, I don't think the strict keto diet is
Yeah,
necessarily
right.
what I'm talking about, but
Yes.
yes, knocking out a lot of the
Yeah, the
starchy
sugars and
stuff tends to really
yeah,
help a
yeah.
lot
Because
of
I was a
people.
sugar addict. I mean, I just
Yeah.
was, and I think it really aggravated me. And I just noticed that over that period of time, I just felt better.
Mhm.
And so it was a little hard to, because I was being so strict. Um, it made it hard to sustain it.
Yeah.
And so that was part of it. And so, but the nice thing is I have not gone back to, I mean, I was a person that dumped 5 teaspoons of sugar, heaping teaspoons of sugar into a cup of tea that was only 8 ounces. I don't do that anymore. So in the 4 to 5 months that I practice keto, it helped me in the long term not to go back to some of the things I was doing before. So I've not gone back to all of that. So that's
Wonderful.
been good.
Yeah.
But diet is huge, and exercise is huge too. So now, you mentioned something several minutes ago about women of color as it relates to menopause, but I want to ask you something more specific. Do you think women of color, specifically African American women, suffer more, have worse symptoms than their white counterparts?
Now, that's a hard question
Mm,
to pinpoint. I don't I don't know whether some of the aggravation of symptoms is worse because of biology,
right.
but it may be based on the other things going on. I mean,
Yes.
people are very complex, and
Yes.
we tend to be carrying
A lot of
a
burdens.
load,
Yeah.
taking care
Yeah.
of parents, taking
Yeah.
care of
Lots.
children,
Lots. Yeah.
um, you know,
Yes.
single heads of households at
Yes.
times. There's a lot of complex factors going on into that. Obviously, systemic racism. There's a lot
Sure.
of things that can contribute to
Yes. The stress.
how much stress is going
Yes.
on in an
Exactly.
individual's body. And I don't discount that at all for African
Wow.
American women.
Wow.
So I do
Yeah.
think there may be something there. Can I pull a study?
Yeah.
No. And I see plenty of white women who are suffering very
Yeah.
greatly with their symptoms.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I would suspect that there's
Yeah.
some factors there that
There
can
are
play.
factors. There are factors. That's a good point. If you're dealing with all of this other stuff, that would make anything you're dealing with physically worse. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
it
that's just
amplifies it.
it
Absolutely.
amplifies it. You're right. Stands to reason. So that's a good way to deal with it. I just there are so many things that are popping into my head right now that I would love to ask you. So I may need to call you back. I know that this is a topic that women are going to gravitate to because several women asked me, when are you going to talk about menopause? And that was, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. So we may have to do a part 2 because I'm thinking of like 16 questions right now. But I know,
Okay,
we
great. I'd
both,
be happy to.
yeah, it would be great. I think you answered a lot of questions, not just for me, but for a lot of women. And I'm just thrilled that you get to kind of we get to kind of vet this thing out together. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. We will talk again soon. And until we do, God bless.
Absolutely.
Be good now.
And
Thanks.
you look
All
forward
right.
to it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.